Welcome to Waking Up America, the Not Morning Show. Today's news, Kari Lake drops an absolute bombshell for her election fraud case that should wake up every single American. Let's talk about this while we still can. I am your host, Alexander Graves. I am a constitutional conservative. If you guys enjoy this content, please consider following us on Twitter at AmericaWakeUp. And if you guys would like to support our content, please go ahead and head on over to buymeacoffee.com/wakeup. Greatly appreciated. You guys can donate there or subscribe, your choice. Let's go ahead and get into it here. Okay, first story of the day, and my lord, Newsweek is incredibly biased here. There's so much garbage in this article, but I'm highlighting the important points here because they can't not write about this lady. Let's get into it. So Kari Lake, it starts off, who's refusing to accept she lost Arizona's 2022 gubernatorial election. It continues with that language through here, but I'm going to skip through most of it. Nearly 250,000 voting attempts failed in the state on election day, she states. Katie Hobbs, who was inaugurated as governor of Arizona earlier this month, only by a margin of 17,000 votes. Officials, Lake tweeted on Monday that officials sabotaged election day, and on November 8th, when 75% of votes were at Kari Lake, nearly 250,000 voting attempts failed. Let that sink in. 250,000, so 250,000 votes plus, potentially, failed, according to system log files, which were obtained via the Freedom of Information Act. So they had to actually submit a Freedom of Information Act to even get any of this information, to get the system logs from the voting machines. This is 100% grounds for them to do a recall election. There's just no question there. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. If you look at the elections and you see this many votes are not being counted, just imagine what that is on a national scale. I don't care what party you're from, left or right. You have to look at this and say, okay, maybe there are some irregularities in our election system here. Maybe there is a better system. Maybe there's something better we can do here to make sure everybody's vote is counted. Unless you are just being disingenuous and you actually do not want people to have a fair say in our republic. Let's move on here. So more information came out from Kari Lake here. This is also pretty freaking huge. Bombshell discovery, she says, today's Senate testimony confirms nearly 40,000 ballots were legally counted, 10% of signatures reviewed. This picture right here shows several ballots where signatures were verified. People don't suddenly change their signatures. Let me see if I can pull these up here. Yeah, you can see here. So this one should be matching to this one. Not even close. This one should match to this one. Night and day. This one to that. This one to that. None of these look correct. It looks like somebody is forging those signatures to push those ballots through. More than likely, this could be ballot harvesting. Regardless, there should be some form of verification on here. Obviously, the systems that we have in place are not working for election integrity, and this needs to be investigated. And I say this all the time because I get incredibly rude comments in the YouTube channel, and I love them. I love responding to them, so leave them, please. I love the fight. I get this comment all the time. Basically, people saying, oh no, election fraud's not here. It's not real. It's not here. You can see the evidence in front of your face, okay? We're looking at the signatures right here. You can see, even if it's just one vote, even if it was just one example, that still proves there is election fraud. And this pendulum, it does swing back. So you may be protesting it now, okay? What happens? Who knows what's going to happen in the next 20, 30, 40 years? What happens if it switches? What if it's suddenly, oh, all these votes are just swinging 90% of the Republicans? Yeah, that would be horrible, wouldn't it? So you owe it to yourself to look into this stuff. It shouldn't matter if it turns over one governor's race here, okay? What's important is that we have integrity in our elections and that we can trust that our votes are counted either side, because it will be on your foot at some point in history, assuming our country doesn't fully collapse by then. I want to dig into some of the data points here. Let's go ahead and get into this next article. So Shelby Bush with We the People Arizona Alliance brought the receipts with her presentation to the Arizona State Senate hearing on Monday, and she brought a ton of evidence for her that does need to be considered. We've gone over those points already, but let me dig a little bit deeper into the data here because it is absolutely insane. Bush wants Arizonans to understand that the continued problems with signature verification have a lot to do with the county's failure to properly fund and staff the signature verification process. So this is an independent group that went in and they went through and verified these signatures. So the claim was based on the amount of votes that came in, it took them 8 seconds. It would have taken them 8 seconds on average to verify a signature before moving on. You can't do that because you need to pull up records sometimes too. So 8 seconds on average is just a ridiculous number. So, quote, their calculations found that ballots would have had to be SIG verified every 8 seconds to get through the ballot envelopes in the allotted time. Only 2.5 days for the election day ballots. Instead, Arizona Alliance found it should take about 30 to 40 seconds to adequately review one record. Bush added, the math just doesn't add up to giving the county what they need to adequately do this job. Okay, so 420,987,000 of the 2220 ballots failed the signature verification, which we've gone over, leaving that election openly vulnerable to fraud. According to Bush, that means that there were allegedly approximately 40,000 ballot envelope signatures, or 10%, that were illegally counted in the 2020 election, and there were 181,378 potential bad signatures, far more than the margin of Hobbs' lead in the gubernatorial election. Okay, so this is where they break down the data. Okay, Hobbs won by 19,000 votes. On this alone, quote, egregious signature mismatches on this chart is at 38,909. Even if you discount everything else, all of these other bad ballots that are in here, that right there would be enough to sway an election and should mandate a recall. I mean, if you add up half of the things on here, they go over that. So unreasonably different control signatures, 48,117. Okay, so there's plenty of evidence to see here. Control signatures that do not match the voter, 36,034. That's 3 separate instances of evidence there that would be enough to justify the recall with how close this race was. And honestly, even if it was less than 19,000, they only needed 0.01% to issue a recall. So literally you can take any tabulation on that list and that would have been enough to issue a recall. Quote, tabulator errors, machines failed 235 times the regulated rate. That's insane. Moving on. Voting machines failed 230 times the regulated rate. We, the people of Arizona Alliance, also received in early January the system log files from the tabulators used in Maricopa County on Election Day. The Freedom of Information Act request also requested in the receipt of the redacted cast record CVR files. Bush explained, quote, through analysis, we were able to determine that 250,000 ballot feeds were misread by those tabulators. So there are approximately 2 tabulators in every polling center, which means there are 446 tabulators with 250,000 voter attempt failures. So why is that important? Okay, we know that during the primary, these election machines worked perfectly fine. During the general, they fail at 235 times the standard rate, and these machines must be administered by an administrator. So this proves there was tampering in those machines. This is a complete bombshell for her case. I'm more optimistic than ever for Kari Lake's case here. All right, moving on. Kari Lake posted another thing here. So one of the experts in the expert testimony, and speaking of, we will be going into her appeals court oral arguments once they are released. One of the experts said that with 99.999% confidence that 291,000 bad signatures were accepted in the 2022 election. Now you add this to the 300,000 ballots that we know had no chain of custody. It's just outrageous. So that's over 500,000. Okay, that's 600,000 votes, just under, that experienced some sort of issues. And that doesn't count the tabulator issues shutting down. We've got the system logs now, and we've got the bad signatures and the faulty chain of custody where these ballots should not have been counted. Once they're out of the control of the officials and supervisors that should be watching over this from both parties, you cannot trust that ballot. It has been completely out of your control. Who knows how many of those had suddenly new signatures on them. Okay, let's continue, because her case is just so concrete. And if it goes to the Supreme Court, of Arizona. I don't have faith for the Supreme Court of Arizona. I feel like they will more than likely strike it down because nobody wants to overturn an election. Nobody wants to be in that spotlight, especially in today's vitriolic society where we are all at each other's throats. But if it goes to the actual federal Supreme Court, I feel they will rule in her favor, and a recall election could quite possibly be called here. So let's get into it. Election day tabulators rejected nearly 250,000 vote attempts on election day. The election changing finding contradicts Maricopa County's previous statement claiming that just 70 out of 223 voting centers and only about 17,000 ballots were impacted. So during the initial trial, they only said that 17,000 ballots were impacted. The Freedom of Information Act proves that close to, I believe, it was close to 250,000 were actually impacted here. That's not a small margin. That's a very, very wide margin. And this is why they're fighting tooth and nail to not get it exposed. So now let's go into what exactly it would take for a recall to happen. This is actually kind of interesting. So this is Arizona law. A recall may commence after an individual has been in office for 6 months. So unfortunately, Arizona, you do have to last 6 months with Katie Hobbs as she is pushing the far left agenda, including persecuting people for not following gender ideology garbage in schools. And it says, except for state legislators, which can be filed 5 days after the start of their first session, and no specific grounds are required. Okay, so the requirements here: a petition can be made for a recall, and if they receive 25% of all the votes cast in the election, they can issue a recall. So this may offer another recourse for Kari Lake if the trial, for whatever reason, does not succeed. I would hope that they would be looking into this significantly and looking at possibly getting a petition together to get the signatures of that. Now, mind you, these recall election procedures here are a lot easier to do on smaller elections because, you know, if something has only 3,000 votes and it's split, you only need 1,500 people. I'm sorry, you need less than that, 750 people to get something like that. So this would require a massive movement. We'll see what happens here. It will be interesting, but I do wish Arizona the best of luck because, unfortunately, under Katie Hobbs' leadership, this stuff happens. Border Patrol agents report more than 300,000 apprehensions and gotaways in December alone. So at least 225,797 people were apprehended entering the U.S. illegally nationwide in December. Now, this is just the people that were apprehended. This is not the gotaways. In Arizona alone, it looks like over 800,000 in 2022 were entering Arizona, and that number is expected to increase. We have recently, we have recently broken the record from November and then December. January's numbers are not out yet. It is increasing. This is not small amounts of people. This is literally 313,428 was in December. That's 1/3 people just walking and strolling into the United States and getting lost. Like they're not being tracked right now, and they're flooding these states. It is going to be destroying these economies. Okay. That being said, I'm hopeful for the future. I will keep you guys posted on the Kari Lake content here. If you guys enjoyed this, please follow us on Twitter at AmericaWakeUp. And if you would like to support this content, please go ahead and buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/wakeup. It's a donation website. It's not actually coffee. You guys can just donate or subscribe as you wish. Please comment below. I'm sure I'm going to get plenty of mean comments down there. Again, I love them. Comment, like, subscribe, head over to Rumble, follow us over there if you want to support this content and support this as well. We are aiming to hit 1,000 subs, so that is the goal. It might be a little overzealous to hit it by the end of the month, but we'll see what happens. We're growing quick. Greatly appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay in the fight, keep the fire, and keep a round in the chamber.